They say silence is golden, but mine was forged from ash, tempered in betrayal and sharpened by pain. The world thinks the loudest scream is the one that shatters the sky. But no, the loudest scream is the one that never leaves your mouth. It builds inside your bones. It poisons your lungs. It howls through your bloodstream, but dies before your lips can tremble. And no one ever hears it, except you. I learned that silence is not the absence of sound. It's the presence of everything unsaid. Every word I wanted to scream. Every truth I wanted to hurl like a blade. Every wound I swallowed. They never vanished. They turned into shadows inside my chest. They built a kingdom of ghosts behind my ribs. They thought I was quiet because I was broken, because I had nothing left to say. But they never understood. I chose silence because every word felt like betrayal to myself. Not all silence is peace. Some silence is punishment. Some silence is the rope you wrap around your own throat to stop yourself from begging one last time. You want to know what silence is? It's sitting in a room full of people and realizing your soul is the only thing not invited. It's hearing laughter and knowing it's built on your absence. It's watching the hands you held build monuments to your failure while pretending they don't remember your name. Silence is when you see their smiles and feel every knife behind it. And then they have the audacity to say, "I'm sorry." As if that one word can sew back a heart they shredded for fun. As if an apology is anything more than a bandage on a fatal wound. Apologies are currency for cowards. A cheap it, and when I rise, there will be no apologies, no forgiveness, no words, only silence. And the sound of power returning home. The first cut wasn't the deepest. It was the quietest. A whisper in the dark that sounded like, "Trust me." But that whisper was the beginning of the end. See, the trail doesn't always arrive with blood and war cries. Number. It comes dressed as love. It wears your favorite smile. It sounds like comfort. It smells like home. And that's why it hurts like hell. They didn't stab me with rage. They used silence. They used distance. They used, "I forgot," and "I didn't mean to." They made the blade out of absence and pushed it in every time they looked through me like I was never there. Do you know what it's like to be erased while you're still breathing? To sit at the table and realize you've become just another shadow in the room? It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small ones. A slow dismantling. A smile that didn't reach their eyes. A reply that never came. A promise left unanswered, like a loaded gun on the floor. They shattered me in slow motion, piece by piece. Not with fury, but with indifference. And I stayed. God, I stayed. Because I believed in loyalty like it was holy. Because I thought if I loved louder, they'd listen harder. If I held tighter, they'd stay longer. But you can't hold people who are already letting go of you. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was the delay. The seconds between realization and acceptance. The space where hope tries to bargain with pain. The moment you look into their eyes and realize they've already left. They just haven't told you yet. That was the fracture. That was the first scream I swallowed. Needed to feel the fracture, to let it become fuel. Because the first break wasn't the end of me. It was the awakening. They buried me in betrayal, but they didn't know I was the seed. Now, I grow in the dark. Now, I bloom in silence. And the next time they hear from me, they won't recognize the voice. Because the man they betrayed is gone. The silence they created, that's where I learned how to never need them again. After the fracture, there was no scream, no firestorm, no dramatic exit, just silence. But silence is not emptiness. It is not surrender. It's not a blank space. It's a battleground. I stepped into it like a soldier walks into fog, uncertain but unafraid. Because what waited for me there wasn't peace. It was rebirth. Silence is where I stopped explaining, where I stopped begging to be seen, where I let the voices fade, the critics, the liars, the ones who cheered as I fell. In the silence, I listened to the storm inside, to the ghost of who I used to be, still whispering beneath the rubble. I found every broken piece they left behind and picked them up in the dark, not to put myself back together, but to build something new. Because I realized I didn't want to be who I was before. The man before silence was too forgiving, too loud with love, too soft with traitors. He believed words could fix everything, that apologies had weight, that loyalty meant permanence. But in silence, you learn. You learn who you are without the noise, without the pretending, without the need to be understood by people who only ever saw your usefulness. I used to think silence was cold. Now I know. It's cleansing. In the silence, I found clarity. Not comfort. Clarity. Pain speaks in riddles. but silence speaks in truth. You start to see it all. Who they were, who you were, and what must now rise from the ashes. And so I built, not loudly, not with announcements, but brick by brick, scar by scar. I turned my silence into a forge. There's a kind of anger that doesn't burn bright. It doesn't shout. It doesn't break things. It waits. It simmers beneath the skin, coiled, quiet, patient, like a snake in tall grass, watching, breathing, learning. That's the anger I carried. I didn't scream. I smiled. I didn't strike. I observed. They never noticed the shift because it wasn't loud. It was surgical, controlled. I walked through rooms that once felt like home and let the silence bleed. I listened to voices that used to warm me and now only chilled my spine. And still, I smiled. Not because I was fine, but because I was focused. Anger, when fed recklessly, makes you sloppy. But anger, when hidden, makes you unstoppable. They thought I was over it, that I'd moved on, that their apologies were enough to buy my silence. They mistook my calm for healing, but I wasn't healing, I was hardening. Every fake embrace, every half-hearted sorry, every lie masked in good intentions became fuel. Not for revenge, but for reinvention. I didn't want to hurt them. I wanted to outgrow them. I wanted to rise so far that their names turned to whispers lost in the winds of my ascent. So I disappeared, not to escape, but to evolve. You see, some fires don't rage. Some fires hum quietly beneath the surface until they melt steel. That's the fire I lit. That's the heat I embraced. They gave me matches when they left. They handed me flames with every betrayal. And I built a forge. I forged a version of myself they could never reach. One they could never shame, never silence, never betray again. I stopped seeking closure. Closure is a cage, a trick to keep you circling the same door that already locked behind you. Instead, I turned it all into gold-lined scars. Now I wear them like armor. Now I rise not to prove anything, but because it is time. Time to leave behind the ashes. Time to let the silence speak louder than any apology ever could. I didn't come back to prove anything. I came back unrecognizable, because the real rise doesn't happen with noise. It doesn't need a stage. It doesn't ask for applause. It happens in the dark. While they laughed, I labored. While they celebrated my disappearance, I crafted my reappearance in silence. I didn't broadcast the process. I didn't tell them what I was becoming. Because kings don't announce their return. They arrive, and the world makes room. See, they thought they erased me. They thought they buried me. But the problem with burying someone like me is that I wasn't a corpse. I was a seed. And seeds don't scream in the dirt. They grow. They push through pressure. They embrace the dark. They bloom when no one's watching. That was me, rising in the shadows. No noise. No noise. No need. I trained when no one was looking. I built in silence. Sharpened in silence. Transformed in silence. And now that I'm back, they can't recognize me. Because the man who once needed their approval no longer exists. The man who begged for belonging was buried with his voice. This version of me doesn't knock. I walk through doors like I built the damn room. You know what real power is? It's not walking into a place and needing them to remember you. It's walking in and watching their silence reveal everything they fear. They try to greet me like nothing happened. They try to pretend they never vanished. But silence remembers. It records. It holds receipts in blood and time. So I don't return with revenge. I return with results. I don't carry bitterness. I carry transformation. And that transformation, it's not tears in the dark, asking why no one stayed. That version of me deserves this throne. That version of me earned this crown. That version of me was the blueprint for the beast I've become. And now that I'm here, I don't announce myself. I embody it. You'll know I've arrived when the room gets quiet. When eyes shift. When guilt rises in their throats and no one dares speak. Because I didn't come back as a man. I came back as a movement. I am the silence that survived. I am the shadow that rose. I am the proof that kings are built in silence and crowned without consent. You thought I was silent because I had nothing left, because I was broken, crushed, erased. But silence was never surrender. It was strategy. While you were talking, I was building. While you were celebrating my fall, I was designing my rise. And now, I don't need to speak, because everything I've become screams louder than your apologies ever could. I didn't just rise, I returned. But not as the man you remember. Not as the fool who forgave too easily. Not as the warrior with a soft heart and open arms. Number. I came back forged in fire, crowned in shadow, armed with silence that cuts deeper than words. Because now, I am not the echo. I am the storm. You see, I let you speak. I let you lie. I let you run your mouth while I ran my empire. I gave you the illusion of distance while I buried the past beneath steel. You said, he's disappeared. But kings don't disappear. They retreat to conquer. And now I stand on ground you thought would always be yours. Now I move through spaces you thought you locked me out of. Now I sit at tables you tried to flip beneath me. Because while you were wasting your breath, I was sculpting silence into a throne. I don't speak vengeance. I embody consequence. And here's the truth you don't want to hear. You lost the moment you underestimated my silence. You thought I was down, but I was loading. You thought I was defeated, but I was preparing for dominion. Everything you took from me, I turned into fuel. Every betrayal you delivered, I built into stone. Every apology you whispered, I burned into ash. And now, you don't face the man you left. You face the kingdom he became. I don't raise my voice anymore, not because I demand the throne, but because I built it while you were sleeping on my worth. My silence, it was the language of kings, the weapon of gods, the mark of the ones who rise without permission. And now that I speak, the world will tremble. Not because I yell, not because I scream, but because every word I say was born from silence and carries the weight of fire. You should have feared the moment I stopped speaking, because it meant I was done explaining, done forgiving, done hoping. And once a man reaches that point, he doesn't come back for peace. He comes back for power. So no, I don't want your apologies. I don't want your recognition. I don't even want your regret. I want you to understand. You never silenced me. You shaped me. And now the silence you tried to bury me in is the throne I reign from. You called it distance. You called it coldness. You called it arrogance. But it was always one thing: dominion. Now they speak. Now they reach. Now they offer words, like broken twigs trying to hold up a fallen tree. But the silence has spoken. The reckoning has come. And it's too late for sorry. You want to say you didn't mean it, that it was just timing, that you were confused, busy, young, lost. But here's the truth. You meant every silence, every absence, every moment you watched me break and chose not to speak. Don't pretend now like your silence was an accident. It was a decision. And I lived in the consequence of it alone. So why now? Why speak? Why try? Because I became something you never expected. Because I rose without needing your hand. Because I made the fire my friend and walked through it without screaming your name. You don't get to speak now. You forfeited your voice when you ignored mine. You abandoned the conversation when I was begging for one. And now, when you hear the thunder I've become, you want to whisper apologies like they can hold back the storm. Number. You can't apologize to the ashes of the person you buried. You can't make peace with the ghost of the version you destroyed. I bled in silence. I healed in silence. I rose in silence. And now, I reign in silence. You see, the ones you forget don't stay forgotten. They rebuild. They transform. And they return not to be welcomed, but to witness your discomfort. I walk past you now, and you look away. Not because you don't recognize me, but because you do. You see what you tried to kill standing taller than ever, and it burns. I know it does, because there's nothing more painful than realizing the silence you gave someone became the soil they grew their crown from. This is your reckoning. Not through revenge, not through violence, but through witness. That's what closure feels like. Not revenge, not chaos. Just silence. Unapologetic. Untouchable. Unstoppable.